Hello, my name is Martinette Horner, and I'm coming to you from Durham, North Carolina in the United States. I am excited to share with you a quick video using the watercoloring technique from our watercolor pencils. I'll be using colors from both the Assortment 1 and Assortment 2 packs. I'm excited to use garden birdhouses as my stamp set. This is in the annual catalog. I absolutely love the garden birdhouses. I think they lend themselves perfectly to coloring of any kind, but especially with the watercolor pencils. For my paper, my card base is Balmy Blue. It's a standard card size of 5.5 by 4.25 inches. I'm using one of the patterns from the Designer Series paper stack from the Subtles, and this is also the Balmy Blue. You can see that it coordinates beautifully. I'll be using a layer of Poppy Parade. The Poppy Parade measures 3.5 by 2.5 inches. And then also our Fluid 100 watercolor paper that's 1/4 inch smaller on all sides. So this one will measure 3.25 inches by 2.25 inches, so that I can make a nice little frame around my watercolor piece. So I like this color combination with the Balmy Blue and the Poppy Parade. I think they go very well together. And in some ways I'll incorporate those colors when I stamp and color my birdhouses. So I'll set this aside for a minute so that we can concentrate on the watercoloring. I'm going to use Sahara sand to put down my images. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because when I'm using a watercolor technique, the Sahara sand is nice and soft. It's not as stark as a black ink or a black outline when I'm trying to accomplish a watercoloring technique. So what I'm going to do here is start this particular birdhouse up high. I'm going to use the pole to give it something to land on, and I'm going to also stamp that in Sahara sand. Everything will be stamped in Sahara sand. Okay, and then I am going to stamp the next birdhouse. Maybe a little bit shorter. Just to give some visual interest and height. And again, my little pole to have something to rest on, to hold it up. And I believe I'll leave that there because what I don't want to do is overcrowd the paper. I'm trying to leave a little bit of space here to eventually stamp perhaps the hello sentiment from that set. Okay, so now let's concentrate on the watercoloring. I know that I am playing with this color combination of Balmy Blue and Poppy Parade. So I definitely want to color one of my houses with the Balmy Blue watercolor pencil. And what I like to do, there's several different ways that you can use your watercolor pencils, but one of my favorite techniques is to go ahead and color the image with the pencil. And notice I'm not worrying too much about filling in every single piece of the white space of the paper, and I'll show you why in a moment. I'm just interested right now in putting the color down. Some folks are a little intimidated with coloring with the color pencils because they feel like they don't get nice smooth images. I too dislike the lines that tend to happen with color pencils, watercolor pencils in particular. Putting in a little shading to make it a little darker in some spaces. But when I use my water painter, and I'm going to use this size brush, I'm going to apply some of the water from the water painter, and that tends to smooth out those lines in the watercolor pencils. And that gives us a nice watercolor effect. It tends to just soften the image and what you've colored. So our water painters come in 3 different sizes. There's a wide brush. Let's see if I can find it on my desk. Oh, here we are. There's a wide brush for larger areas. You can cover a lot more in those larger areas, a lot more quickly. There's this medium brush that you see me using here. And then there's a fine tip, a finer tip for those very narrow spaces. I think for my purposes, at least for this particular house, I'm fine with the medium brush. I am being careful to stay somewhat in the lines, but this helps to soften the watercolor pencil a great deal. I always think about so much freedom when I'm practicing a watercolor technique. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not meant to be perfect, okay? And so it's supposed to be kind of freestanding, if you will. And I actually want to use, let's do Cajun Craze for the rooftop, the shingles. One other thing I want to share with you with the watercolor pencils is that you can also pick up the color from the tip of the pencil and color with it. It gives you a stronger color because it's activated the color from the watercolor pencil. And so remember, this is wet. The tip of the aqua or the water painter brush is wet. And so I'm able to pick up color from the tip of the pencil and then just apply that to the image. Okay. And yet a third way of using your watercolor pencils will give you a very, very dark image, very rich image. And that's if you dip the watercolor pencil tip into water. So I'm just using a little cup of water here, and this one is cherry cobbler. I just want to share with you what that looks like. So I dip the tip of the watercolor pencil there, and I'm going to just add in some dark lines here to give a little bit of depth and interest to this particular birdhouse. I don't want to color this entire thing in cherry cobbler. See how strongly that comes out because I dipped the tip. I actually want to paint this one in the Poppy Parade, again, to coordinate with that layer that I have that will be behind it. So I don't want to go all the way with that, but I wanted some depth. And now I'm going to use just a little bit of Poppy Parade ink because we don't have a pencil color in Poppy Parade, unfortunately. So I'm going to pick up some of the ink out of the top and then just color in my second birdhouse. And I like the effect that the darker lines give to the piece. It's like a little shadow. And I actually might need to get a smaller brush for this one because these are some tight little slats on this house. So my water is pulling in some of that darker cherry cobbler. Again, that was just for a little bit of visual interest and depth. Hope you can appreciate that. I feel a little Bob Rossish, even though I'm not doing any trees or anything, but I'll channel my inner Bob Ross for card making. How about that? Okay. All right. I think I will switch now. Let's put a little bit more color, some brighter colors in this one. We want to attract the birds, right? So I'm going to put in a yellow door. And this is the Daffodil Delight from the first assortment pack of pencils. And I think I'll go ahead and take out my smaller, thinner brush here. Let's smooth that out a little bit. All right, now for the rooftop here, I'm going to use a combination of gray and black. I noticed when I was just playing around with what I wanted to present for you, the black was really, really dark, and it tended to cover up the image such that you couldn't really tell the shape very well. And while I want the ink to be soft, I don't want to totally obliterate it so that we can't tell what we're coloring or what the image is supposed to be. So I switched from black to basic gray. Okay, let me grab my yellow. I think I'll make this part yellow as well, so the little birds will know where their little entry is. All right. Don't know if there's some science as to the colors that tend to attract birds to the houses, but I'm gonna go with that. Okay. And again, we'll use our brush to kind of smooth those colors from the pencil. Just smooths out any lines you might have. Okay, and I'll go back to the medium one to smooth out the roof line a little bit. So this Fluid 100 watercolor paper is not really phased by the water that I'm applying. It's a little more difficult to do this with cardstock because you would basically create a hole or tear a hole in your paper. So this Fluid 100 watercolor paper is built for this technique. It's built to withstand the water. Oops, grab black. I wanted to grab the gray. Okay. And this is a point where I feel like I probably should leave this alone. Sometimes you can overdo it, and I'm on the verge of that, right? Now I'm going to come back in with my Cajun Craze and give a little color to the posts, creating a little bit of a shadow. And then using my thin brush, smooth it out. Just smooth it out, okay? Now, to finish this off, I'm gonna stamp hello in Poppy Parade. I'm doing everything I can to pull in the color of that layer that I chose. So this will be just a little hello note card. I do have some cards I need to get out. And there we go. The last thing I want to do is to provide some type of a background. And to do that, I'm going to get my Balmy Blue again. And I just want to create just a few little stripes, just to give it something to to rest on. And I'm going to go back in, probably with some yellows, maybe. I don't want to make green though. Yellow and blue make green. So maybe I will do, let's do some pinks, like a pink sky. Just a little bit. Okay. And I'm just applying the watercolor pencil directly to the paper. And that probably is looking like a hot mess right now. You're looking at this like, what is she doing? She's destroying this image. I promise you by the time I use my water painters, it's going to look a lot better. All right. And so, as promised, let's go back across this with my medium water painter and try to smooth out those lines. There we go. And I'm just creating a little bit of a background, a sky, behind my birdhouses. Notice I'm avoiding the hello. I don't want to fade that. I probably should have done this before I stamped the words. But my goal here is just to smooth it out. I want it to kind of create a little bit of a background so that my birdhouses aren't just floating on the paper, if you will. Okay. I need a little bit more water, so I'm going to squeeze the barrel of my water painter. I don't want to go overboard, but I just want a little bit more moisture in the brush. There we go. My brush was getting a little dry, so I knew I needed to get a bit more water there. And I'm being careful not to go into the colors I've already used for the houses, because they definitely will smear the page, and I don't want that. Just sticking to my sky image, creating that watercolor effect. Okay. I think I will use, though, the very narrow to get around the words. So I'm going to have to be more careful around here. So I'll use this narrow brush to get around the edges of hello without messing up hello. I don't want to smear that one, okay? So I can control it a little bit better around there than with the small narrow end than the larger medium brush end. Okay. And once again, this is probably a good moment to let that go. Finish that up. And I am going to use dimensionals to pop the image off of the Poppy Parade layer. All right, and now let's put it all together. So you, of course, have a couple of choices. I think this little plaid pattern goes very well with the birdhouses for some reason. Whenever I'm working with layers, I prefer the liquid glue because it's a little bit more forgiving. I have a few seconds to move things around if I don't like the way the layers went on. You see that? So I'm able to just move it around a little bit until I get it where I want. And now I'll just add sort of the centerpiece, if you will. I'll add that centerpiece to finish it off. And then to really finish it off, let's just do a few embellishments. And I absolutely like the epoxy dots here. They remind me of little water droplets. Whenever I am affixing any type of elements or embellishments like this, I like to think in groups of 3. And so I am going to affix 3 of these. Let's vary the size. I have one here. And in affixing a group of 3, I kind of like to go in a rough triangular shape. When I mail cards that have these kinds of embellishments on it, I'll put a little layer of cardstock just over the top, not adhered, but just put it in the envelope so the embellishments don't break through the envelope. Okay, so that's my card using garden birdhouses and watercolor pencils and watercoloring technique. I hope you enjoyed it.